So it has been 110 days since we set up these two identical Anubias immersed bins. We used two different types of soils to make these bins. So let's open them up and see what kind of growth we had and see if there's any noticeable differences. Oh yeah, that does not look good at all. Huh, interesting. Let's see how the other one's doing. Okay, this one looks a lot better. So I think we've got our answer. So let's pull these out and see how the plants look. I'm a little speechless, honestly. I really didn't expect this experiment to go the way that it did and be as clear-cut as it is. And I was a little worried setting this up because in the past I've done a lot of experiments where I weigh each individual plant, count the number of leaves on each individual plant, and it's incredibly tedious, but I do it because I like running the stats and I like having a conclusive answer if there was any noticeable differences or not. But in this case, I didn't do that because I just simply had way too many Anubias plants and they were starting to die on me and I needed to get them into something so that they would grow and not die. And so soil is easier. Now, as you know, I do like, and my preferred method is to use this ebb and flow system behind me. I find that gives me the best growth. However, soil is what I've used when I was starting out, and soil still gets really great results, especially if you look in this bin, maybe not so much this one. But in this video, I'm pretty sure I know the reason why this happened, and I also know a solution where I'm going to extend the life of this experiment and I'm going to keep these plants in this setup, but we're going to see if we can turn this around to see if we can get these plants to rebound and hopefully look like this or better. Now, 110 days ago, I set up both of these bins 100% identical. We only used two different types of soil. The bin on your left here is the Pro Mix bin, which clearly outperformed the other bin. Now the bin here, we used a generic black earth soil, and I'm actually kind of surprised because years and years and years ago, I used to only use black earth to grow aquarium plants, and I remember getting some, pretty good growth out of my plants. But now after running this experiment, I'm realizing that I probably left a lot of growth out on the table, because had I been using a proper potting mix, I could have been having these results as opposed to these results. All right, so obviously there is some sort of reason why the black earth didn't perform as well as the Pro Mix. And unfortunately, I think it's kind of a boring reason, and I think it is just simply they didn't have enough fertilizer. In fact, if you are newer to identifying plant deficiencies, take a look at these plants because this is textbook nitrogen deficiency. In fact, they are probably also deficient in a lot more nutrients than just nitrogen. Now, this result is not too surprising to me because the bag of Pro Mix basically told me at the start of this experiment that it was going to outperform the black earth, and that is because there was an NPK value associated with that soil. And by reading the ingredients, it seems like at least for the nitrogen, it was a polymer coated nitrogen fertilizer, which means that it is most likely a slow releasing fertilizer. And seeing as those plants are still looking healthy and show no signs of nitrogen deficiencies, it probably is still slowly releasing that nutrient for those plants. Now on the Pro Mix bag, there is also one more consideration that may have been a contributing factor to why these plants grew so much better, and that is that the soil actually contains spores of a mycorrhizal fungi that is going to help the root development and overall health and vigor of our plants. And as you can see, it seems like these plants are doing pretty well. And actually, upon closer inspection of the Pro Mix plants, some of the Anubias plants are starting to have little tiny pinholes show up on their leaves, which is a telltale sign of a possible potassium deficiency that is starting in these plants, which makes sense because there was only 0.1% available potash in the soil to begin with. So it is possible that they are starting to use up that potassium and show signs of deficiencies. This is what I'm thinking we can do to continue this experiment and see if we can turn these plants around. All we really have to do to test this theory out is to add some nutrients into these bins and see how the plants respond. So what I have here is some hydroponic nutrient solution that I actually use in my system behind me. And I also have a spray bottle here that has some foliar spray. I'm thinking that we can use a combination of foliar spray and some extra hydroponic nutrient solution to help replenish some nutrients in the soil here. Now, one of the benefits with using soil is that oftentimes soils and decomposing organic matter can have a high cation exchange capacity, which I've talked about a little bit in the past on my channel. But essentially what that means is the soil can attract ions in the form of our nutrients and help hold them where the roots of the plants are located and help the uptake of those nutrients. So in theory, what we should be able to do is add some more nutrients into these soils, and they're going to hopefully bind to the soils and become available for the plants. Now, because we're not 100% sure what the cation exchange capacity of these soils are, regardless, I think adding nutrients in the form of a hydroponic nutrient solution should help these plants, because after all, I have been growing tons of Anubias plants behind me in a relatively inert soil, and the only nutrients they get is derived from the nutrient solution. So we know that these plants can survive off of hydroponic solution. But before I go adding nutrients into this bin, I'm gonna go through and I'm going to pick off all of the yellowing or dead leaves, because after all, these are going to be blocking some of the available light. All right, so I've gone through and I think we're finally ready to replenish the nutrients into the soil on this bin. And if you're curious exactly what nutrients I'm using for pretty much all of my Emersed plants, I have a video that I'll link up above somewhere that you can check out to see exactly what I'm using. So I'm probably gonna add all of this liquid divided amongst these two bins here. I'm just going to kind of evenly distribute all of this liquid, and it'll work its way into the soil. Same thing here. So as that nutrient solution works its way into the soil, I'm also going to be using a foliar spray to help revive these plants. Now, we just added full strength nutrient solution to these plants, so there is a risk that if some of that residual solution is on the leaves, it could cause some nutrient burn. But what I'll do is I'll use the foliar spray, and we'll just give these plants a really good spray to kind of clean off any of that full strength solution. All right, so these plants are now ready to go back on their shelf, and hopefully within the next few days to a week, we'll start to see some new growth. I'm really curious to see if this is going to solve the potential potassium deficiency that we had in the ProMix plants, as well as the plethora of deficiencies that we had in the black earth plants. Now, another note about the foliar spray is that I normally use it every few days or so on regular Emersed bins. However, given the extreme deficiencies that we had in the black earth, I'm probably going to use this daily for the next week or so, just to monitor the plants and hopefully start to see some of that new growth. The foliar spray is really going to help drive some of the initial growth in these plants, especially if they have a weaker root system that's not quite fully into the soil. So that's going to help carry them over until they get roots into the soil, at which point the hydroponic solution that we added to the soil should be fueling their growth from there. So we'll check back in on these plants in a couple months to see if this solved their problems. And if you like these kind of experiment videos, I have one experiment here that you might like, where we're looking at different propagation techniques for Anubias. And I'm actually going to be harvesting and filming the results video for that experiment in the near future. So take a look at that video to get familiar with that experiment, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see some future videos from my channel. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, take care.